showtime.
And here we go on a Tuesday. Wheelhouse, you're listening to ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. It is Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022, as we kick things off. Start of a brand new show. Short show, only on until 5:30, so BK is thrilled about that. Aggie basketball coming up on the station, so we take you until then. Very interesting date, 2/22/2022, on a Tuesday. So I've seen a lot of play on words throughout the day. I saw some of that from Cody and Andrew in the Wheelhouse group chat getting ready for the show today. So happy Tuesday to you all.
Man, there's no better way to say it than happy Tuesday.
A day of twos.
A day of twos.
Yeah. When's the next time this happens? March?
I am not going to even try to guess when this happens.
3rd? 3033?
What about 22-22? 2-2-2-22-22.
February
22nd in 200 years.
Okay.
That would be one additional 2. I will not be here for that.
I might.
No chance.
Modern medicine, you never know.
Modern medicine.
Oh, yeah.
Are they going to freeze me like Walt Disney?
Well, back in the day, George Washington was dying at like 38, as we discussed on this show.
As you erroneously discussed and I corrected for everybody.
I do want the Ted Williams frozen head treatment for myself.
That's what it was. It was Ted Williams' frozen head. I confused him and Walt Disney.
Okay.
Did they freeze all of Walt Disney or just Walt Disney's head, or is it the Ted Williams head that's frozen?
The Ted Williams head is frozen.
I thought Walt Disney was also frozen. Is that wrong?
He might be. I don't know. I cannot confirm nor deny. I've not spoken with him lately.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. We might have to do some research on
this. They froze all of Walt Disney's body.
Okay. Not his head?
His head is included in his body.
Okay.
But it's not just his head. Ted Williams is just his head.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyone know where that head is?
I would assume in a very cold place.
Fenway Park.
The freezers at Fenway?
Yep.
I don't know, man. I went to Fenway last summer, and I took a tour of the place, and I didn't see any Ted Williams head. I feel like they would be sure to note that on the tour if that was available.
Here's one of the greatest Red Sox ever's frozen head.
You know that infamous yet so famous seat in right field at Fenway Park?
That's where you want the head?
It's buried underneath that head. That's what I've been told.
Yeah.
Buried underneath in a thing that keeps it cold?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know how it works, but that's how it works.
All right. Well, there you have it. That's Head Talk here on a Tuesday on the Wheelhouse. Guys, we start today with more on Deshaun Watson. Yesterday's legal news, how it impacts the Texans' timeline to trade him going forward. Because, look, obviously this is a very serious situation, and, however the litigation process plays out, it plays out. What Deshaun Watson's allegedly accused of is very serious stuff. But as a sports show, most Texans fans listening right now probably are concerned, all right, how does this impact when he's eventually going to be traded? So yesterday on the show, we had Mike Meltzer on, who is a longtime radio host in this market, also a attorney with a law degree from the University of Houston. And this was Mike Meltzer kind of breaking down what happened yesterday and really the big takeaways from everything that occurred with this hearing between both sides.
Today was not a win for Deshaun in court because technically when Rusty Harden's available, which it sounds like it's not this week, it's not next week because he's got I think he's in trial on something else. But in 2 weeks, it sounds like Deshaun's deposition could go forward, which might provide some leverage for the Tony Busby side to get a settlement on at least some of these cases before that takes place.
So Deshaun wanted to delay everything as long as possible until the criminal investigation was final. Mm-hmm. Rusty Harden, Deshaun's attorney, said yesterday that April 1st is when they should know whether or not a grand jury is going to proceed and possibly press charges against Deshaun Watson. Kind of feels like we're in another holding pattern, though, until we get to that date based on what happened yesterday.
I have said for a very long time that if I was Deshaun Watson and his side, I would do everything I can to avoid sitting down for a deposition on any of these civil cases. And with this getting pushed back 2 weeks, the people around Deshaun Watson need to get to him, and they need to let him know that if you settle, okay, and everyone signs an NDA, yes, there will be some people that think you are guilty and think you did it. If you get these cases and you fight them, there will still be people that think you're guilty and think you did it. If there are no criminal charges, there will still be people that think you did it and think you are guilty. But if you are playing football A large majority of people that follow your career will stop thinking about it. And a settlement and making this go away will get this further behind Deshaun Watson than fighting this tooth and nail to the bitter end and getting his name cleared in court.
Can I make a very delayed joke? Jake, I thought you said we were done with head talk.
Well,
okay, that's a perfect example, BK. Like, Tony Busby's going to ask about these type of things.
Yeah.
Tony Busby's going to try to embarrass Deshaun Watson.
so is that the most delayed joke anyone has ever made on the Wheelhouse program?
I didn't want to cut you off, and it was a good Meltzer cut, so I didn't want to interrupt that, but I did not want to tell the joke, so yeah.
It actually had so much time that it officially turned into a callback instead of a delayed joke.
Right.
It was a
I couldn't have
callback
just
to a
given the
previous-
punchline without reference the joke from a few minutes ago. I agree with everything you said, Cody. And look, for the Texans, it's obviously best case scenario for Deshaun Watson to get this thing settled, and both sides can work on a trade and getting Deshaun Watson out of here. From a Deshaun perspective, I understand not wanting to settle to an extent because, yeah, in a sense, you are admitting guilt, and a lot of people will assume that you are guilty. Why are you paying all of these women if you didn't do anything wrong? You must be guilty if you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But there will still be people, and there is still a chance that Deshaun is proven guilty or found guilty in the court of law if he does try to fight this thing tooth and nail. It's not like it's guaranteed that he's going to be innocent. I mean, some of the claims, and it feels like there's some evidence. I don't know how good it is. I don't know if it would be enough to prove Deshaun guilty. And once again, it's innocent until proven guilty. But there's at least some evidence out there that makes me think that this thing is not going to be easy for Deshaun to win. So, yeah, settling gets him over this, gets the Texans over this. It's the best case scenario, I think, for this football team and most people in this city. And I'm with you. It feels like Deshaun can start the next chapter of his life if he gets this thing settled without dragging this out over the next few months, potentially longer than that.
We were 4 months ago. 4 months ago, Deshaun Watson and his people had 18 of these 22 civil cases settled. 18 of these 22 4 months ago. Like, they were close to settling those. And when they couldn't settle all of them, they just decided to settle none of them. And all 22 have proceeded and gone forward and are continuing to finish the litigation against Deshaun Watson. I just don't understand who's advising Deshaun Watson and who is telling him that you shouldn't be settling. I would be doing everything I could to convince Deshaun Watson to settle these because, BK, you brought up a very important point. If you fight this and you lose, there's no benefit of the doubt. You did it. You're a creep. You're a weirdo. You sexually assaulted these women. If you lose, that's what happens. If you settle, they're still out there, the benefit of the doubt. Well, okay, maybe they had a little bit of evidence. Maybe it was just easier to pay them for them to go away. He can maintain his innocence, never say anything about it. The women can maintain that he did something wrong, never say anything about it. They're financially compensated for what happened. But BK, what you brought up is the worst case scenario for Deshaun. Fight it all the way, tooth and nail, lose, and then everyone knows you're a pervert and it's confirmed by the courts.
One of the big takeaways from yesterday is why Rusty Hardin doesn't want to proceed forward with the deposition until the criminal case is resolved. Think about how it looks, and Cody, you've talked about this before. You've talked about this even in this segment. How it looks if he gets up there and pleads the fifth to all the questions. I thought Mike Meltzer with us yesterday had a really good breakdown on why exactly that, why Rusty Hardin will just have Deshaun plead the fifth if he has to do the deposition earlier than they want to after that April 1st deadline.
So what Rusty Hardin was arguing was, hey, Judge, if you make Deshaun Watson sit down for the deposition, then I'm going to tell him to plead the fifth. Because any attorney, in Rusty's words, would tell their client in the same situation to keep pleading the fifth for every question that is asked. And Rusty added, that's going to make Deshaun Watson look bad in the court of public opinion. What if he takes the fifth in a deposition for literally every single question for a couple of hours? It's released by Tony Busby on social media, as Tony tends to do, and then all of a sudden, a few weeks later, there are no criminal charges filed. How does Deshaun bounce back from that in the court of public opinion? That was, to me, kind of the crux of Rusty Hardin's argument today.
And it makes sense because if you think back to like history of significant trials, a lot of times when you plead the fifth, you kind of look guilty. You do. Go back to the OJ trial. Cody, you brought this up on the show before. When Mark Furman's up there at the stand and they're asking him, did you tamper any evidence? And he has to sit there and plead the fifth because he's pleading the fifth to everything else. It makes him look guilty, even if he wasn't guilty. It made OJ look innocent, and OJ ended up winning. So then that was a big reason why, if you watched any of the OJ documentaries over the years. So, yeah, it shouldn't be that way, but a lot of times when you do plead the fifth, you look guilty. So from a Watson standpoint, it makes sense why they're trying to make sure there's no criminal charges, because what you say in a civil case can and will likely be used against you in a criminal investigation.
It's a very convoluted situation that I wonder if there are times where people around Deshaun Watson or even Deshaun Watson himself has wondered, okay, I understand why I fought at the beginning, but I should have conceded earlier. I should have decided on a path opposite of the one that I am now. Because at some point, the old poker term, at some point he becomes pot committed. And he's like, screw it, I've spent all this money on Rusty Harden. Rusty Harden ain't cheap, okay? Deshaun Watson made $10 million last year from the Texans. He didn't play at all. Probably killed him to not play football for a whole season, something he's done since he was, 5 years old? Okay, probably killed him to not play football a whole year. He made $10 million. Some of that's going to Rusty. If he settles, some of that's going to the people accusing him.
Yeah.
If he fights it and wins, a lot of that's going to Rusty. If he fights it and loses, a lot of that's going to Rusty, and it's going to the women. So, and that's basically everything that he made last year.
Right.
Like, I mean, at some point, Deshaun Watson has to take inventory of the situation he's in and say, I don't want to get pot committed where I have to see this thing all the way through, and I feel like settlements is the way to go about that.
Man, I never want to tell somebody how to spend their money. I also never want to give anybody legal advice, and I never will, because it would be a huge waste of time for me and for you for that to happen. But, yeah, it just feels so easy to just settle this thing and get it over with and move on with your life and get traded out of Houston like you've wanted to for over a year now. Just move on with everything. But that's telling Deshaun to fork over a bunch of money. And if he feels like he's innocent, I don't know if he is or not, but if he feels like he's innocent, it's hard. It has to be hard. Maybe Rusty Harden has tried to convince Deshaun to settle. Maybe David Mulugeta and other members of Deshaun Watson's team have tried to convince Deshaun to settle. Maybe they said what I just said. Dude, get this over with. You've got the money. Move on with your life. Let's continue your football career. But, man, telling a guy to fork over millions of dollars for something he believes that he didn't do, a whole hell of a lot easier said than done. So, I want Deshaun to do it from a Texans fan perspective, but if this thing drags out, I understand why he's dragging this out and fighting this thing as much as he is.
I really believe the biggest mistake he made was after the first accusation came out, he immediately took to Twitter. His lawyer, whoever it was at the time, it wasn't Rusty Harden yet, he put out that statement and he said, it's not true. I'm basically being blackmailed. I'm being extorted. And that was like basically the call to action for all these other women who had similar experiences, allegedly with Deshaun Watson, to then come forward and then start suing him civilly. And then it snowballed from there. I wonder if he had just settled that initial claim behind closed doors, what would have happened? Nothing would have happened, likely. He would have been traded by the draft last year. He'd be playing football right now, and none of us would have known any of this was happening.
And the fortunes of 5 to 8 different NFL franchises would be totally different. I mean, it'd just be that's a wildly crazy alternate timeline that we're not going down right now.
713-780 ESPN's the number if you want in on the conversation. Twitter, you can always reach us at Jake Asman, at Brad Kellner, at Cody_Stoots. Make sure you follow at ESPN 975.